Welcome to a conversation with a community leader. I'm Cary, your host, and I'm the former mayor of Bellevue, Washington and Bremerton, Washington, and I'm currently a Port of Bremerton commissioner. And my guest today is a community leader for sure, and she's an old friend of mine who I used to work with. Her name is Andrea Spencer. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, nice to be here.
And Andrea is the Director of Planning, or what's your title?
Director of Community Development for the city.
Director of Community Development for the city of Bremerton.
Correct.
And has been there 15 years because I hired her as a director. I mean, she kind of hired herself. This is a story, but I was in my office one day and we were looking for a new director, and she had just been hired by the city
A year prior.
And she came into my office and said, I think I can do this job. Why don't you hire me? And I sat and thought about that for a few minutes, and I really respected your approach, to be honest with you. I always like people that are aggressive. And so I hired you with very little experience, and boy, has that turned out to be a good hire.
Thank you.
You've done a great job.
Thank you.
So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience a little bit, Andrea? Where are you from? What brought you to Kitsap County?
Mm-hmm. Well, my background in education is actually an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture. And I was so interested in the landscape and more than just a site-by-site basis that I ended up going to graduate school to get a degree in regional planning. Mm-hmm. So with a degree
Where'd you go to graduate school?
I went to graduate school at Wazoo. So
I'm a cougar.
I'm a cougar, longtime cougar,
Okay.
both undergraduate and master's.
Yeah.
And just love the thought of influencing the landscape on a much larger scale. So I went from graduate school directly to working for city local governments, trying to shape their plans for the growth.
Where'd you work first?
I worked for the city of Mount Lake Terrace, and then I worked for the city of Shoreline.
Yeah, I remember. You came to Bremerton from Shoreline, I think.
I did, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then while I was working in King County, I bought my house in North Kitsap. So I was a Kitsap resident since the late 90s.
Oh, so you were commuting from...
I was commuting on the ferry boat.
Yeah, my wife did that for 15 years.
Uh-huh. And there was all sorts of stories in the newspaper about the great revitalization of Bremerton and all the things that you were doing, actually. So one could blame you for the reason that I came to the city of Bremerton, because I was really excited about the notion of a city's rebirth and guiding it into its future. So,
well, it was true. You know, my story was similar. I came over here after having been mayor of Bellevue, and I was kind of semi-retired and living in Seattle. And someone called me one day and said the college is looking for someone to help us rebuild the foundation. I thought, well, that'd be a good job for a couple of years. So anyway, I took it. I ended up being there 5 years, and the downtown and the city, you could tell, was really struggling. They had been the retail center of Kitsap County, and Sears moved, but you know, they were on the water. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, wow, what an opportunity. And my original vision for downtown, I think it's still true, is that downtown would be an urban neighborhood, not so much a retail center or even an office center, but one where people lived because they were on the water, they could get views of the water, they could access downtown Seattle. And so I thought the key was getting people living down there. And I think you guys, and we've done a pretty good job of that. And so that was great. Let me ask you a couple things. You're seeing a lot of growth. I'm sure you're busy. What kind of projects are you seeing coming across your desk for permits and that kind of thing? What are you seeing going on here in Bremerton?
Sure, it goes back to your comment, is like Bremerton is really, its revitalization is through a lot of new housing development. So we've seen in the downtown a lot of new progress for multifamily housing, but we also have some other developments of big industrial type developments out near the Bremerton Airport, where we've got the Amazon facility for deliveries. Yep. And then there's also, just this week alone, more facilities for warehousing to support the Navy as they're undertaking this huge development to do another dry dock in town. So we think we'll see some changes in the near future about the kinds of uses that are proposed in the city.
Well, for years, Bremerton was a company town, mm-hmm. right? The company was the U.S. Navy.
Yes.
And that hasn't really changed. I mean, Kitsap County is still driven by the military, mm-hmm. and the 20 or 30,000 people that work in Kitsap County. And now it appears that the Navy's going to invest a lot of money in this community. The dry dock alone is going to be a huge project. I think I saw 80 million in planning money.
Yes. Billions of dollars in construction.
Billions in construction.
Yes.
And then they're going to invest billions in the kind of the revitalization of the shipyard, which is over 100 years old. And so, and I remember when we did, talking to the shipyard, we did the new museum, Navy Museum, and we moved old Building 50 out there. And I thought that was an impossible job, but that worked out pretty good, I think, that whole thing. So, yeah, I think the Navy, because they're not going to do this work themselves, they're going to bring in a lot of contractors, right?
Right.
So those are the people that you're seeing.
Right. Making applications for new warehousing development to support the construction activities.
At the port, we're full. If we build a new building tomorrow, it'd be full. We got a waiting list of, and the airport's a pretty interesting place right now. We've got, I don't know how many hangars, we've got 200 or 300, and they're all full, and there's a waiting list. So we're right on the verge, and I'm sure you guys in the city have talked about this because I know the mayor has interest in this, and what the future of that airport looks like. Now, we're not going to be the next SeaTac, right? That's not going to happen. But a smaller regional airport, in the future, there's some possibility that could happen. So we're looking at a couple of things that I thought. I watch you guys, your planning commission once in a while. I'm an old city guy. I can't help it. And I like your planning commission. I think they, and you got the head of the shipyard as as the chair of your planning committee, for God's sakes. And he does a great job. Rick Tiff, so I'm talking about. So you passed, which was kind of interesting, last year, I think, on some new legislation about ADUs. Can we talk a little bit? What is an ADU? What do you see happening with it? What's its impact going to be on our community?
So I guess I'd like to set the stage a little bit about why ADUs and why that's so important is...
So what does ADU stand for?
Yes, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. So how is it that you can add housing stock to the city without a big change to the fabric of neighborhoods? So the city's been having a strategic plan of trying to make sure that we have more housing. You hear about this in the newspaper all the time. Housing, housing, housing. How do we get more? And one of our initiatives that we've been doing is how do we get more infill housing, and accessory dwelling units is one of those initiatives. So the city made pretty wide sweeping changes to our accessory dwelling unit regulations to allow every resident, so every house in the city can actually develop an accessory dwelling unit. I'll just say ADU. No matter
the size of their lot?
No matter the size of their lot.
Wow.
And they can do an ADU if your house has the right size basement. You could do one in the basement. You could do a cute cottage in the backyard. You could do an addition to your house.
What is an ADU?
An ADU, accessory dwelling unit. So it's a place that you can have your mother-in-law oftentimes can move in.
We used to call mother-in-law
law apartments is a common term.
Right.
Granny flat is another term that's talked about.
They have to have a kitchen and a bathroom?
A kitchen and a bathroom and usually a bedroom. Sometimes they build them like a studio. Sometimes it's like a miniature house where it has separate rooms. But it's a great way to get infill housing so that we can start to address the supply issues that we have in the city of not enough housing.
So many, if you drive around the neighborhoods of Bremerton, so many of the city houses are on really small lots.
Yes.
This is old inventory that came around in the
Yes.
30s and 40s probably, or maybe the 20s. But I some of them you wonder how they couldn't get another. They don't have room, right?
The benefit of some of those old houses is actually the fact that they have basements, and we've made some building code changes that allow some exceptions to height of rooms so that we can be more strategic. How can we fit the units in without changing the look of a neighborhood so that an ADU could be accommodated within somebody's basement?
Can an ADU be a trailer?
No, it has to meet some design standards for the city. So it has to look very much like the main house. So if your house has a certain kind of trim and a roof pitch, then the cottage has to basically match that structurally.
Well, where this will have, a lot of families are now living together, right? I mean, kids aren't leaving home, so to speak, and or people getting older want to live with their kids, or all that.
Yes.
And this will really give more opportunity for that kind of thing.
Absolutely,
right?
multi-generational.
And then it'll be income for people who just want to do it and rent it out.
Yes.
For retired people maybe
Yes.
who want to. So you could probably build something like this for 100 grand maybe.
Probably, depending on your situation. If it's going to be a small addition to your house or a cottage in the backyard, it kind of depends on the construction.
What about if a lot of these houses, which they are in Bremerton, I don't know, maybe they're not, I forget, are on septic tank?
You have to have adequate septic facilities, so it's a lot easier to accommodate an ADU on a site that actually has a sewer hookup. So most of the city is on sewer, so that's
Yeah.
a lot easier than doing one with septic.
Right. What was the public feel about this? Did you get any opposition to it, or?
We didn't get much for opposition, and actually the Planning Commission recommended and the council adopted the authority to build 2 ADUs per lot. We came into this initially with just, let's modify our regulations to allow 1 ADU, and it ended up through public testimony and influence of the community to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended 2 ADUs per lot, and the City Council adopted it that way.
Well, there's some people probably who have big old lots and
Yes.
they can do that.
Absolutely.
I would say most homes in Bremerton aren't on big
Right.
lots. Maybe up in Manette, there's some and that sort of thing, and Marine Drive,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But it'll be interesting. Are you seeing any activity?
We're seeing some activity. It's a slow process, like changing the direction of a ship.
Right.
You kind of set the course and then you get there over time. So we're tracking each of the permit activities to see what kind of influence that we've
Are
had
there
on the market.
developers and architects and people who've kind of taken this on and know how to build these little homes, little houses?
There's some that specialize in that activity, yes.
Yeah. Well, growth management laws say that this is where the growth's supposed to go, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And although Silverdale never figured that one out, but I guess it's a good thing. What worries me about it, concerns me, is the neighborhood interaction and the quality of life in neighborhoods, and whether you increase all this density, do you also put in the support systems that density is going to require?
Right. We need sidewalks.
You need sidewalks.
Bike lanes. We
need
need
bike lanes.
safe routes to school
You need
for the
health
children.
care.
Yes.
You need health care availability. It's hard to find doctors now, that
Yes.
sort of thing. So, neighborhoods are really the core of most people's lives where they live. I live in a neighborhood where we have a lot of walkers and everybody knows everybody and yada, 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 and it's pretty cool. Something like this is going to definitely change the dynamic of a neighborhood if a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
So the question is going to be, how's that going to impact people's quality of life and the whole neighborhood system that communities should need to be working on all the time, right? Overall, do I think it's a good idea? Yeah, because a big issue in our community is affordable housing. You can't rent an apartment, 1-bedroom apartment, for less than $1,700 or something like that. Well, if you're working, maybe at the shipyard, you can afford that. I'm not sure what the average shipyard income is now. Probably about $80,000 or something like that. But housing's expensive.
Yes.
And one of the things that was attractive about Bremerton all these years, it had some affordable housing in it. Well, that's all changed. I mean, I think the average cost of housing in Kitsap County now is $450,000, something like that.
Yeah, I think.
In my whole hometown of Bellevue, it's $1 million, and in Seattle, it's $900,000. So how are people going to afford that? So these alternative options are a good thing to be considering.
Yeah.
So speaking of all that, this big news out of the legislature this time, right? And I wrote it down here. What is it? House Bill
1110.
1110, which basically wipes out zoning.
Yeah. But it doesn't. There's a lot of initiatives that's in 1110 that the city has already implemented. So the city of Bremerton has actually been a leader in accessory dwelling units, cottage housing, a lot of the infill housing things that we've been doing to modify our code to make sure that we help the supply build is in 1110. So a lot of what we've done, I think 1110 contains provisions for ADUs, things that we've already done. So I'm not a lot concerned about that new bill because the Bremerton City Council and the Planning Commission have been leaders in making sure that we're ready for the next phase of growth and making sure that families have places to live. So there are certainly things that we're going to have to do with the city's comprehensive plan update, but that bill isn't as concerning as it would have been 5 years ago because of all the efforts that we've undertaken to help morph our zoning codes and regulations to encourage more housing for what they call it the middle housing bill.
Well, it's certainly pretty. It's a big change. You know, I noticed in Seattle and Bellevue and a lot of those places that had country clubs and fenced-in communities, and they've kind of jumped right on this and tried to figure out a way it didn't impact their community, right? And I guess it doesn't. I don't know that, but if you've got certain rules and regulations about what can go in your neighborhood, what do they call those? Covenants?
Or we have covenants, yes.
Covenants. Then maybe this bill doesn't affect your community. I don't know.
And I can't weigh in on covenants because that's like a legal aspect that's outside of the city's control.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a big deal. Do I think it's probably? I noticed it was almost unanimously supported. So that's all driven by cost of housing issues
Yes.
and homelessness.
Yes.
Do you guys talk? Speaking of homelessness, do you guys talk about that at all in the city? And we don't seem to have a big problem now, but there's probably no question that we will in the future. Um, and I know there are a lot of government agencies who are working on this. I just don't want to see the county. I worked in downtown Seattle from 85 to 95, right on First and Cherry. And I was running the King County Boys and Girls Club at that time. And that's where our office was. And you could see homeless issues and crime issues starting to percolate up. And, you know, nobody did much about it. And they didn't take it seriously enough. And then it got worse and worse and worse and worse until what we had and what we have now. And it was just because it got out ahead of them. And they didn't put the resources in to stem the tide, so to speak. And now they have, you know, parts of Seattle you wouldn't want to be in at night, and they have homeless encampments that, you know, so they're investing billions now in trying to solve that problem. So my question is, I mean, with growth, we're inevitably going to have, especially with cost of housing, we're going to have we're going to have more homeless people, and we're going to have crime issues.
It's a great question. That what the city has done is ensure that we are doing things to stabilize housing and to subsidize housing. So for stabilization of housing, we're working with some of our partner agencies to do weatherization and minor home repair so that people don't lose their houses, so that they stay where they're at long term. We've seen stories of people who are disabled, elderly, et cetera, that they wouldn't be able to stay in their house but for this weatherization and minor home repair program. And we've also been a leader to develop a rental assistance program in partnership with Bremerton Housing Authority to make sure that people through
Section 8?
Yes, there's Section 8 housing, but there's also city money that we're putting into rental assistance to make sure that people don't lose their houses, that they stay in their homes. And through the pandemic, we had specialized programs, but then we also have ongoing money that we have in this program to ensure that people can stay in their homes. And we're actually partnering with BHA in the next couple years and BHA is Bremerton Housing Authority, BHA for a housing navigator program, because oftentimes you talked about Section 8, people come and they have vouchers and they have a voucher which feels like winning the lottery, but they have no place, they don't know where to take that voucher and how to spend it.
Or people aren't taking vouchers.
Right. And so what BHA is going to be doing in partnership with the city as well as Kitsap County is using some of our federal funds to hire a housing navigator who's a specialist in knowing who can take vouchers and sharing with property owners that having a voucher holder is a very beneficial thing because we have unused vouchers. People have their winning lottery ticket, but they have no place to spend it.
Right.
And so this housing navigator is going to be a very important thing to help people get into housing. So those are some strategic, specific things that we're doing to try to make sure.
Cities are, and you know this better than I, but cities are really going to have to become much more expert and informed on these kind of issues now. I see King County's got a big ballot issue on today about building 5 new centers around the county that take in people with mental health issues, because that's a lot of what the homeless problem is, right?
Yes.
It's you can't throw these people in jail.
Right.
They shouldn't be there. Some of them should, but most of them shouldn't. So, and speaking of the housing authority, we got the housing authority to move out of their old ramshackle stuff when I was working where you work, and got them to build this new project. How is that working? Is it being successful? Is it providing affordable housing for people, their project on Kitsap Way up on the hill?
Yeah, BHA has been a tremendous community partner for building housing. They are actually a great partner with Kitsap Mental Health for Pendleton Place. You talked about the people with mental challenges that needed housing. It's a great project that they've got that just opened up last year.
Right.
And it's fantastic to be able to address issues of people with mental challenges as well as homelessness issues. And so BHA has been a great community leader, and we look forward to having them grow.
So do you
more.
have a little coalition that kind of gets together that has people from the housing authority in the city and all that to talk about these issues on an ongoing basis?
And there needs to be more. There's
Yeah.
more initiatives that we're working to develop and partner
But
with.
Seattle got in trouble. I mean, I think they started pouring money at anything they could because it started affecting the downtown, and people started complaining, and they've created 4 or 5 new agencies. And what I read, and only what I read, is they're all just somewhat dysfunctional. Cross, spending way too much money, not getting enough done, and I just think they panicked, and they finally, whoa, we got a big problem here, a lot bigger than we thought. Let's create some agency. We can put the money into that agency, and we won't have people calling us.
Oh.
That's kind of what I see happen. So I think it's really important now to really be communicating, be planning, be talking, because it's going to come.
Yes.
It's inevitable.
Yes.
I mean, it's just part of the world we live on today. I grew up a long time ago, and you didn't see any of this. But this is a different world today, and I'm glad to see you guys are getting something done. Speaking of growth and all that, where are you with annexations? I know when I was mayor, we did the biggest annexation in the history of the city, I think. We annexed Skia, for God's sakes. And are there still plans to annex other properties adjacent to the city?
Yeah, we'll work toward annexation as the people desire to do so.
Right.
So
and if there's economic benefit to
Yes.
annexation,
yes,
I always thought, okay, we might be willing to do that, but I'm not going to annex something that's going to cost the city money,
correct.
right? And
Yes.
take away take away from the current citizens that are living there. I'm a little selfish about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do a fiscal analysis for every annexation to ensure what the impacts to the city is going to be, as well as to the residents. So we actually have online tools. If people are interested, they can go online. And we have a tool that people can put their own address in and figure out what it would cost to annex to the city. So we have some tools out there for citizens to use, too, to figure out if it's fiscally responsible for them to do that.
God, I'm running out of time. I knew this thing would go way too fast. There's a big project right where Fred Meyer is across the street on Rydell that's going on, a big housing development there. Is that in Bremerton?
Yes, it is. Just behind the old Lowe's
Yeah,
site.
yeah.
Yes, it's a multifamily housing and lots of development happening actually on both sides of Wheaton Way.
Are these projects that are going in, I remember I think we had a requirement that certain percentage would be affordable.
Yeah, there's no requirement for affordability, but what they're doing is they're building pretty small units that end up being affordable to the 80% median income folks.
Okay. Good project by Wes Larson and his group down there on the water. That's going to help downtown a lot. It's going to bring a lot of new people. We sold them, the port sold them that property, and we're kind of a partner in that deal because we own part of the parking garage. You know all this, and with COVID and everything, we were all worried about that project. But good for Wes, and it's all together, and they're renting it out. So
It's a gem on the waterfront.
yeah, absolutely. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to mention?
Oh, what I'd like to mention is that just for the city of Bremerton, as well as every jurisdiction in Kitsap, we're all working on our major update to our comprehensive plans.
The county is too, right?
Yes, the county, city of Bainbridge Island, Paulsbo, Port Orchard, we're all working on our updates to our comp plans. So engage whichever jurisdiction you live in, engage with your local process because the planners want to
How
hear
do you
from
do that? You go to meetings or
You
go
go to
online?
meetings, you go online. There's all sorts of methods in which to participate.
It's so important.
Yes.
And the Silverdale area is going to be such a important aspect of what the future of Kitsap County is going to be, because it's a lot of land and they have a lot of sprawl.
Yes.
You know, I've always said, you know, that's a potential place for some urban growth there, right?
Yes,
Because they
absolutely.
really are urban.
Yes.
And they could go up. Why not 15 stories? And we've got more height than downtown, right? That
Yes.
we're using,
Yes.
right? And you know, you put a lot more people on a smaller space. I've always thought that was a pretty good idea. So that's for future. You're a leader. You've been a leader for a long time. Do you have a leadership style that you believe in? How do you lead people?
How do I lead people? I get out of their way. I trust them and let them do their jobs.
So that means you hire good people.
I do hire good people. I've got a really great team in community development, and they do.
I'm really impressed when I see you on the show. You've got a fellow young man that works side by side with you. He's very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I watch that, I go, well, I've enjoyed our conversation. It went way too fast, but it's an exciting time to be in Bremerton and in Kitsap County right now.
Absolutely.
And I think everything I hear about you and the job, everybody just 100%, I think you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks for being with me
Thank
today.
you for having me.
Thanks, and that was another program with a conversation with a community leader, and we'll see you next time with another community leader.